From a distance, Cedar Ridge looked perfect. Trimmed lawns, identical fences, neighbors who smiled just long enough to hide the gossip behind their curtains. To David Lee, an engineer who'd moved here to give his disabled daughter a calm life, it felt safe, until the letters started coming. First, a warning for having a non-standard wheelchair ramp, then a fine for leaving a medical lift visible from the street. Before we start the story, please let us know from where are you watching this video. Write down your country and city in the comment box. Also subscribe and follow to our channel to watch interesting stories every day. At the bottom of every notice was the same signature: Karen Mallory Grant, HOA President. David sighed, folding the paper carefully. His wife, Lena, was away at the county courthouse, her robe hanging behind her office door. And their daughter, Emily, 16, bright-eyed, sat by the window sketching the hill she loved. She smiled and said softly, "Dad, why do they hate the ramp?" "It's just so I can see the view." David forced a grin. "Because some people only like perfect things, sweetheart." But perfection was about to crack. Saturday morning, David heard tires screech. Karen stepped out of a silver SUV, sunglasses on, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Mr. Lee," she called, her tone sharp. "Your ramp violates our visual standards. It lowers neighborhood value." David stood on the porch, calm but tight-jawed. "My daughter can't walk, Mrs. Grant. That ramp is her value." Karen's eyes flicked toward Emily, watching from inside, then back to her papers. "Rules are rules." She snapped a picture and turned away, heels clicking like a gavel. From the window, Emily whispered, "She looked at me like I was the problem." David said nothing, but something inside him began to harden. Over the next month, envelopes arrived daily. Noise violations and for the sound of Emily's therapy equipment. Lawn neglect for missing one trimming session during a hospital visit. By the fifth letter, the fines totaled over $12,000. David met with the HOA board. Karen sat at the center, lips pressed in satisfaction. "This is harassment," he said. Karen smiled thinly. "This is compliance. Maybe find another neighborhood more accommodating." He walked out without a word. That night, Emily found him staring at a blueprint on the table, not of their home, but of the HOA charter. He whispered, "If they want to play by rules, let's see how deep their rules go." Rumors spread through Cedar Ridge. Some said David was suing. Others said he'd built the ramp illegally. But beneath the surface, something else stirred. Sympathy. Neighbors began noticing the cruelty. Anonymous notes appeared in the Lee's mailbox. "We're with you." Karen grew paranoid. She started patrols, taking pictures at night. One evening, David caught her flashlight beam crawling across his driveway. "Looking for another violation?" he asked. Karen froze, then hissed, "You don't belong here, Mr. Lee." Lightning flickered in the distance. David's voice stayed calm. "We'll see what the court says." For the first time, Karen hesitated. "Court?" she repeated. He nodded once. "County hearings next month?" And for the first time, her confident smile cracked. The day arrived heavy with rain. Inside the county courthouse, fluorescent lights buzzed over crowded benches. Cameras from local news lined the back wall. Stories of HOA abuse had been trending. Emily sat near the front, wheelchair gleaming under the dim light. Her hands trembled, but her chin stayed high. Karen stormed in, flanked by 2 HOA officers. "This will be quick," she muttered to them. He broke the code. "The judge will see." What she didn't see, what no one told her, was the nameplate already placed on the judge's desk: Honda Lena Lee. Behind the closed door, Lena took a slow breath. She'd been assigned the case last minute, unaware it involved her own family, until she read the first page. Now she faced the hardest moment of her career: stay impartial or protect her child. The bailiff called. "Case 4721, Cedar Ridge HOA vs. David Lee." Karen strutted to the stand, confident. "Your Honor, this homeowner violated multiple community standards, including installing unauthorized structures visible from the street." Lena listened, expression unreadable. Then came Emily's turn. The room fell silent as the young girl wheeled herself forward. Her voice was soft but steady. "I just wanted a ramp so I could go outside," she said. "So I could watch sunsets like everyone else," the courtroom murmured. Karen rolled her eyes, whispering to her assistant, "She's milking it." Lena's gaze sharpened, but she kept her tone calm. "Mrs. Grant, any comment?" Karen smirked, stepping closer to Emily's chair. Too close. "Yes, pity doesn't excuse lawbreaking." Then, in a reckless flash of arrogance, Karen reached into her purse, pulled out a personal stun gun, and hissed, "Maybe she'll finally follow the rules." A crackle filled the air. Emily screamed. Gasps exploded through the courtroom. Lena rose from the bench, voice thundering, no longer the judge but a mother. "Security! Drop that weapon now!" The courtroom exploded into panic. Gasps, screams, the sound of chairs scraping back. Security officers rushed forward as Karen froze, stun gun trembling in her hand, eyes wide with disbelief. Emily's chair rolled back as David sprinted toward her, wrapping her in his arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Her breathing was shaky, but she nodded weakly. Across the room, cameras from local news caught everything: the sound, the flash, the chaos. Karen stammered, It was an accident." Lena's voice cut through the noise, calm but deadly. "You just assaulted a minor in a federal courtroom." Silence fell. Everyone realized the judge was Emily's mother. Karen's face turned white as she finally looked at the nameplate. "Judge Lena Lee." Her lips parted. "Oh my God." The bailiffs cuffed Karen as reporters surged closer, shouting questions. David stood beside his wife, holding Emily tight. Lena took a deep breath and stepped down from the bench, her robe fluttering behind her like a black flag. She spoke not as a judge, but as a mother, steady, proud, unbroken. "You tried to humiliate my family for following the law," she said. "Now the law will speak for you." Karen's voice broke. "You can't judge me. You're biased." Lena's tone didn't waver. "You're right. I won't, but someone will." She turned to the bailiff. "Transfer her case to district court and make sure every second of that footage stays public record." Karen screamed as they led her away. Her perfect composure shattered, her HOA power useless in handcuffs. Within hours, the video spread across social media. HOA president attacks disabled teen in court. Judge's daughter tased during hearing, shocking twist. Karen's picture was everywhere. HOA members began resigning overnight. David received messages from neighbors, people apologizing for staying silent. "I should have spoken up sooner," one read. Emily watched the news quietly from her hospital bed. Her hands shook, but she smiled faintly. "Mom, people finally see what she did." Lena brushed her hair back gently. "Truth doesn't need a camera. It just needs courage." But outside, chaos wasn't over. Someone had vandalized David's property that night. Red paint on the ramp spelling one word: traitor. The attack changed everything. David installed cameras, reinforced gates, and filed a restraining order. But Karen's supporters, a small group of HOA extremists, weren't done. Anonymous emails arrived. "You ruined her life. We'll ruin yours." A rock shattered their front window one night. Another day, Emily's wheelchair tires were slashed. Police patrols began circling the house. Lena sat in her study, trembling hands over a folder marked Karen Mallory Grant versus State of California. The case was bigger now. Not just an HOA dispute, but a public war between justice and privilege. She looked at David. "They think we're weak because we play by the rules," he replied. "Then maybe it's time we write our own." A month later, the district court opened the new trial. But this time there were no reporters. It was classified due to threats. Karen's lawyer tried to spin the story. "My client suffered emotional distress and acted in self-defense." Lena sat quietly among the observers, stone-faced. Then the prosecution revealed the bombshell, video footage from Karen's phone, syncing with courthouse cameras. It showed her smirking seconds before pulling the trigger. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Karen's lawyer's face went pale. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Grant, you said it was an accident. Do you still stand by that?" Karen broke down sobbing, mascara streaking. She ruined my life." The courtroom stayed silent. No sympathy remained, only justice waiting to fall. When the verdict came, the courtroom was silent again, but this time, it was peace. Defendant Karen Mallory Grant, guilty on all counts. Assault with a deadly weapon, harassment, and abuse of authority. The judge's gavel struck. Karen screamed, "You can't do this! I built that community." David stood holding Emily's hand. "No, you poisoned it." As the guards led Karen away, reporters whispered about what would happen next. The HOA dissolved, the bylaws rewritten. Outside the courthouse, the sky broke open into light rain. Emily tilted her face upward, smiling. "Feels like it's washing everything clean." Lena wrapped her arms around her family. It is. For the first time, Cedar Ridge was free of fear, but none of them saw the black SUV parked at the edge of the lot. Someone watching, filming, sending a message. You may have won the trial, but the HOA never forgets. After Karen's sentencing, Brian Keller handed David a small envelope and a warning look. "I took it before they shredded everything," he said. Inside were scanned documents, photos, and a single USB drive labeled Confidential, Ridge Network. What spilled out next felt like a map of corruption. Bank transfers traced from HOA accounts to private shell companies. Meeting minutes showed coordinated harassment plans against families who resisted. A list of donors included local business owners, some with contracts awarded by the HOA. Worse, there were blurry photos of cameras hidden in neighbors' trees, pointed at driveways and windows. Someone had been watching Cedar Ridge for years. David sat on the kitchen floor, the papers spread around him like fallen leaves. Lena read in silence, her face a mask of controlled rage. "They didn't just attack us," she whispered. "They built a surveillance net to control everyone." Outside, a lone street lamp hummed in the rain. Far away, a black SUV idled and the driver adjusted a rearview mirror. Someone had more to lose than Karen alone. Diana Brooks arrived that night with a camera and an urgent look. She had been following Karen's case, but the files Brian gave David were bigger than a single headline. Diana called in favors, reached out to a state-level investigator, and began connecting dots. The names on those transfer lists matched contractors who suddenly won county bids, and one shell company led to an influential developer working on new subdivisions nearby. Neighbors started to talk, quietly at first, then louder. Mr. Patel from next door admitted his fence camera had been hacked. Mrs. Gomez confessed she'd paid dues she never approved. The net widened. It wasn't just HOA greed. It was a system that used fear, money, and data to control who could live where. Diana's footage of the files went live the next morning. Within hours, the story exploded. But the speed of exposure made enemies nervous. That evening, someone slashed the tires on Diana's car and left a note on the windshield. "Stop digging." The note was wet with rain, but the type was crisp and deliberate. They were watching the watchers. Threats grew sharp and personal. Anonymous posts targeted Emily's school and spread lies about Lena's impartiality as a judge. David found a container of bleach poured on the garden where Emily loved to sit. Lena received an envelope with a single Polaroid inside. A picture of their family car parked outside a grocery store, time-stamped in the night. The message was clear: you are never safe. But the Lees refused to hide. David installed new cameras, encrypted the files, and shared copies with Diana and the state investigator. Lena used every legal avenue to subpoena records. The state investigator warned them, whoever controlled the money had reach. "They can bury you with legal battles," he said. "They can drag this out until people are tired." Yet the community's voice grew louder. A small crowd gathered one evening at the Lees' gate, holding candles and signs. "We see you," they chanted softly. The watchers blinked first. Power, it seemed, feared witnesses. Diana's persistence paid off. She called a meeting with Brian in a dim diner and pressed play on an old voice recorder. The tape crackled, and then a familiar voice filled the booth. Karen, but not alone. She joked about keeping houses in line, then laughed as another voice, low and oily, suggested legal pressure, fees, and surveillance. The tape named names: a local contractor, a county liaison who looked the other way, and a developer who wanted to clear land for new lots. Diana posted the audio clip with a careful note. "This isn't a local spat. It's a plan." The clip spread like wildfire. People who had kept quiet realized they had evidence to demand audits, resignations, and criminal probes. Men in suits who once smiled at HOA dinners stopped answering phones. One by one, small cracks became wide breaks. But in the background, the Lees noticed a pattern. The timestamps on the tape matched the times when cameras had been moved and when bogus fines were issued. Someone had been coordinating a calendar of pressure, and whoever made the tape knew it. The watchers were angry. The night the tape went public, the Lees slept with lights on. At 2 a.m., a shadow moved across the driveway. A figure climbed their fence and slipped toward the garage. The motion sensor screamed. David grabbed a flashlight and found one of the Lees' external hard drives gone, the one that held copies of the files and the audio. Lena radioed the sheriff while David chased the silhouette through wet grass. He caught a glimpse of a hooded figure dropping into the trees and a flash of reflective tape on their shoe. When deputies found the hard drive dumped at the edge of town, someone had cut it open and ripped out the plat maps. It was a direct message, "Stop." But the Lees had backups with Diana, and Diana had already sent copies to multiple news outlets and 2 state agencies. The stolen drive was a desperate, clumsy act. The dangerous part was not what they took. It was how close they'd come. Later, sitting at the kitchen table with radio static humming, Lena said quietly, "They can take discs. They can smash cameras, but they can't take the truth once it's shared." David nodded, but his jaw was tight. He felt the net closing and wanted to know who held the final knot. With public pressure and state investigators now involved, the hidden network began to unravel in daylight. Subpoenas arrived for bank records. County officials were called before oversight committees. The developer's name surfaced on emails promising smoother permits in exchange for donations. One small contractor flipped when confronted with proof. He admitted to planting cameras and falsifying invoices under Karen's orders. His testimony was a fuse. Court filings revealed a map showing targeted households. The Lees were not random victims. Families of color, disabled residents, and those who resisted development stood out on the list. The pattern made the story a national headline. Not just HOA abuse, but a system of exclusion built on surveillance and money. Karen's sentence lengthened as new charges piled on. She faced organized crime-style counts for fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful surveillance. The county liaison resigned amid ethics probes. Yet, even as arrests followed and doors closed on the conspirators, the Lees found new unease. A whispered message on a forum. An anonymous email titled, "You started this." The watchers were falling, but someone, somewhere, was still angry enough to fight on. 2 months after the arrests, the Lees tried to return to normal life. Emily was back at school, smiling more, sketching again. But the sense of eyes watching never faded. One night, as David closed the curtains, he noticed a red laser dot flicker across the window, gone in a blink. The next morning, Diana arrived with grim news. "The developer," she said, sliding a folder across the table. He vanished. Transferred all his assets overseas 3 days ago. Inside the folder were photos of him with county officials and a receipt for private security hires. Lena frowned. "He's cleaning house." David's hand curled into a fist. "Then we finish what we started." The quiet war that began in a courtroom wasn't over. It had just moved underground. Diana proposed a plan. Bait the remaining conspirators into revealing themselves. She uploaded a fake new tape teaser, claiming it held proof of who financed Karen's rise and controlled the HOA network. Within 24 hours, threats surged again. Burner emails, fake lawsuits, even an anonymous donation to silence her channel. But hidden inside those messages were IP traces. David worked through the night, tracing signals bouncing through servers. He found one consistent address, an office registered under a defunct construction firm. When the sheriff's team raided it the next morning, they found what looked like a command center. Multiple monitors, maps of Cedar Ridge, lists of problem homes, and one more USB drive. It contained files labeled Project Clearview, Phase 2. The goal was terrifyingly clear. use fines and intimidation to force families out, then sell their properties to developers at pennies on the dollar. Diana whispered. This wasn't about one HOA. It was a blueprint. The new files detonated online. Headlines roared, HOA network tied to illegal evictions and property seizures. News anchors called it the largest suburban corruption scandal in a decade. Families across the state came forward, their stories nearly identical to the Lees: sudden fines, harassment, forced sales. Meanwhile, Karen's taped confessions became viral sound bites, her name synonymous with abuse of power. But as the world burned around the corrupt web, the Lees' faces remained hidden. Their safety came first. Lena, however, received a personal summons from the state attorney general. They wanted her help drafting a new homeowner protection bill. She looked at David, her voice soft but proud. We can turn pain into law. He smiled faintly. Then let's make sure it never happens again. 6 months later, the final phase began. The People vs. Clearview Development Group. Lena sat among the witnesses, not as a judge this time, but as a victim's advocate. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor projected the Phase 2 slides, internal emails detailing forced relocations, bribed inspectors, and manipulated elections inside HOA boards. When asked how she'd respond to what she'd uncovered, Lena simply said, "Justice doesn't stop when the guilty are caught. It stops when the powerless feel safe." The jury deliberated for 9 hours. The verdict came at midnight, guilty on all counts. The court erupted. Reporters filled the steps outside as news of the conviction spread nationwide. But for the Lees, victory felt quiet, more relief than triumph. As they walked into the cool night air, David looked up at the same courthouse lights where everything began. "Full circle," he said. Weeks later, the family drove back through Cedar Ridge. Houses stood quieter now. No patrols, no secret cameras, no HOA officers lurking with clipboards. When they reached their home, Emily pointed to the rebuilt ramp. It had been repainted, freshly lined with flowers neighbors planted in secret while the family was away. A small wooden sign stood at its base. "Freedom Ramp, dedicated to Emily Lee." Tears filled Lena's eyes. David put his arm around her. This valley remembers. And for the first time, they truly felt at peace. The storm had passed, or so they thought. Late one evening, as David reviewed old recordings, a motion alert blinked on his monitor. A lone figure stood by the edge of their property, coat flapping in the wind, face hidden beneath a hood. The person placed a small envelope on the mailbox and vanished into the fog. Inside was a single sentence, printed neatly. Clearview was just one hill. There are hundreds more. No threats, no demands, just a reminder. David stared at it for a long time, then burned it in the fireplace. He turned to Lena and said quietly, "Then we'll keep the light on." For the next ones. Months later, a documentary aired worldwide. The Hidden HOA, Power, Fear, and the Lees Fight for Justice. Emily narrated the final words herself. Her voice trembled, but it carried strength beyond her years. They thought silence was power. But truth speaks louder. Our valley isn't perfect, but it's free. The camera faded to aerial footage of the ramp glowing under sunset light, the valley stretching wide and green below. No narration. Just the sound of wind, calm, unbroken. The credits rolled over a single line, dedicated to every family who fought for their home.